Socialization views. These views are based on the idea that a child's social development may be the key to understanding delinquent behavior. If a child experiences impairment, family disruption, etc., the child will be more susceptible to delinquent associations. And according to an early work by W.I. Thomas, Female Delinquency, what he said, female delinquency is linked to the quote-unquote wish for luxury and excitement by girls. If not socialized under middle-class family controls, girls can become impulsive thrill seekers. Girls are closely supervised more so than boys, who are allowed to take more risks. And closer supervision restricts opportunities for delinquency. Therefore, it follows that girls who grew up in troubled home with no supervision is more prone to delinquency. And this is under Dr. Thomas's view, and that's an early view. Other early views, early research on gender socialization and delinquency led to the conclusion that boys became delinquent to demonstrate their masculinity, and girls were delinquent as a result of hostility toward parents and a consequent need to obtain attention from others, whether that be family or peers. The more contemporary view, while the family can help neutralize the lure to delinquent behavior, girls living in dysfunctional home leads them to delinquent behavior more so than it does for boys. It also has a much more damaging effect on them than boys. Adolescents, especially girls who do not receive adequate affection from their parents during childhood, are more apt to use drugs and be more aggressive. In contrast, those who grew up in a home where parents are supportive and effectively controlling them in a non-coercive way, they're more likely to refrain from delinquency. Boys and girls, but especially girls, who have been subjected to physical, verbal, and or sexual abuse are more likely to suffer from social problems like depression, suicide, and self-injurious behaviors like cutting. Girls affected by sexual abuse may be forced into a life of sexual promiscuity. Girls who engage in the same routine activities as boys, like staying out late, partying, hanging out with friends, they run the risk of engaging in the same delinquent behavior. There are a number of issues related to female delinquency, such as running away. Girls run away from the dysfunction of the home or to escape the abuse they're subject to, and as a result, they run the risk of engaging in delinquent behavior. But not only that, they also run the risk of being victimized. Of course, if they are being abused at home, they are already being victimized at home. But research shows that as they mature, they find themselves in a cycle of abuse and victimization. Research also shows that girls subject to abuse turn to gang participation. During some early research conducted by experts, which was deemed erroneously, but they believed that female gang members were nothing more than sexual objects to be controlled by male gang members. However, recent research has shown that female gang involvement is on the rise, and their overall involvement in gang-related criminal activities is on the rise, which is outpacing their male counterparts. And according to Joan Moore's research, female gang-affiliated members come from the same dysfunctional environment and harmful types of homes as the male members, but the girls were much more expressive about it. They stated that joining a gang was like a path to liberation from the stereotypical roles they would be forced into in traditional society. However, many female gang members experience severe problems in the gang, including sexual exploitation and violence. Joining a gang provides a female with promises of financial reward, identity, and status. Female gang members are also more likely to hold down a respectable job at the same time that they are involved in gang activity. If girls are part of a male gang, they are often asked to commit crimes at the gang leader's bidding because many law enforcement officers may be more inclined to let girls get away with more criminal activity simply because they're girls. But girls who do not wish to be subjected to abuse amongst the male gangs turn to all-girl gangs as their liberation to exert control over their lives. They also join out of frustration because they are the ones committing crimes, running drugs, and putting themselves in danger, and they reap none of the rewards, and their male counterparts maintain all the control. And according to Moore, most females join gangs for friendship and self-affirmation. But recent research shows that economic and family pressures motivate many young women to join gangs. Family pressures seem to be constant where female gang members flourish. According to Moore, high proportions of female gang members have experienced sexual abuse at home. In Los Angeles, where her study was conducted, 29% of a large representative sample of Mexican-American female gang members had been abused at home, and their homes were more likely than male gang members to include drug users and persons arrested for crimes. Moore cites that a majority noted family problems as a contributing factor, citing drug addiction and drug abuse and sexual abuse as the most common problems. So certainly females are getting involved in gangs, which then is increasing their delinquency rate, hence closing in on the gender gap relative to the crime rate. That's just one view. There's other views, the feminist views. The feminist movement has, from its origins, fought to help women break away from their traditional roles and gain economic, educational, and social advancement. As a result of the feminist movement, a number of views on female delinquency has emerged, including the power control theory, which we'll talk about. In the 1970s, the liberal feminist theory focused attention on social and economic role, the economic role of women in society and its relationship to female crime rates. This view suggested that the traditional lower crime rate for women could be explained by their quote-unquote second-class economic and social position. It was assumed that as women's social roles changed and their lifestyles became more like men's, their crime rates would converge. Now, while there were various explanations for the changing female crime rates, two predominant explanations were, one, the increased opportunities for women to participate in the labor force and thus the increased opportunities to commit certain types of crimes, and the changing self-concept and identity of women and girls due to the consciousness, the consciousness-raising aspect of the feminist movement. Now, Dr. Elder wrote Sisters in Crime, cited in the reading materials. She argued that as women continue to strive for equality with men, they will also have more opportunities to commit crimes that were previously unavailable to them due to occupational discrimination. As the position of women becomes similar to the position of men, this will result in women obtaining not only legitimate opportunities in the labor force, but illegitimate opportunities as well. And she further maintained that due to women's liberation, the violent crime rate among women would rise. And Rita Simon wrote Women in Crime, also cited in the book. Her position was only property crime rates among women would increase due to the women's liberation movement. The violent crime rates among women would decrease because women's frustrations would lessen as they are provided more opportunities in employment and in education. And another viewpoint from the feminist movement is the critical feminism. And the critical feminist theorists attempt to explain the cause of delinquency, gender differences in delinquency rates, and the exploitation of female victims through the gender lens. Critical feminists view gender inequality as stemming from the unequal power of men and women in a capitalist society, postmodern society, and the exploitation by fathers and husbands. Now, in this view, or this theory, some of the important issues that are focused on by criminologists include the masculinity in creating female victimization, the exploitation of women in the workforce, and the unequal treatment of men and women in the justice system. There's also a concern about the role of the media in demonizing girls and women of color. We won't go down that path, but it is one of the theories under the critical of feminism. The origin of gender differences, according to this theory, can be traced to the development of private property and male domination of the laws, which led to male control over property and power. A patriarchal system developed in which men's work was valued and women's work was devalued. Women were treated as a commodity, responsible for unpaid work, such as domestic work. The benefits were reaped for free, and later for cheap when women weren't making as much as men, and still aren't today. The patriarchal system sustains the female oppression at home and in the workplace, while on the decline, it still does exist, that theory, and is still supported by society. Critical feminists link criminal behavior patterns to the conflict created by economic and social struggles common with this system, because this system results in males controlling females both economically and biologically. And this explains why females commit fewer crimes. They are isolated by the family and have fewer opportunities to engage in deviant behavior. Research also suggests that in every culture, males try to emulate ideal masculine behaviors. This means being authoritative, in charge, combative, and controlling. Failure to adopt these roles leaves men feeling unmanly. Their struggles to dominate women in order to prove their manliness is called, quote-unquote, doing gender. And crime is a vehicle for men to do gender because it separates them from the weak and allows them to demonstrate physical bravery. Turning to violence toward women is especially economical way for them to demonstrate manhood under this theory, critical feminist theory. And criminal feminists also focus on the social forces that shape women's lives and experiences to explain female delinquency. The attempt to show how sexual and other victimization of girls is a function of male socialization, because so many young males learn to be aggressive and to exploit women. Males seek out same-sex peer groups for social support. The groups encourage members to exploit and sexually abuse women. For example, on college campuses, peer encouragement of sexual violence against women who are considered, I'm going to use the word sluts. The label allows men to justify their actions. This attitude produces numerous incidences of sexual assault against young women. Also, when female victims run away and abuse substances, they may be reacting to abuse they've suffered at home or at school. Those who are on the street, who are homeless, are more likely to have experienced significant social problems, including child molestation, and treated for substance abuse. So not only are females turning to delinquent behavior, they become more of a victim as well. The power control theory was developed by John Hagen and his colleagues, and the power control theory incorporates the conflict-oriented theory and the social control theories that we've already learned and discussed. The theory attempts to explain gender differences in delinquency rates by including family dynamics. Now, how this worked was Hagen's view is that crime and delinquency rates are a function of two factors: class position or power, and family functions, control. The link between the two variables is that within the family, parents reproduce the power relationships they hold in the workplace. As a result, parents' work experiences and class position influence criminality of children. Specifically, Hagen argues youths from families characterized as patriarchal, i.e., the mother had lower status than the father, revealed greater gender differences in delinquency rates compared to youths from the more egalitarian homes. That's where parents had same status, or mother was the only parent in the home. And both of these types of families show the difference of controls placed on sons versus daughters, mainly in regard to maternal controls over children. In patriarchal families, mothers exert greater control over their daughters than they do their sons. Because sons are less controlled, they have more freedom to engage in risky behavior. In Hagen's version of power control theory, it is presumed that boys will be involved in more delinquency than girls for three reasons. First, boys have fewer controls placed on them. Second, boys may view the act of risk-taking as pleasurable. Third, boys perceive fewer negative consequences in response to their behavior. And in the egalitarian families, mothers may exert either less control over daughters or more control over sons. So according to Hagen, as mothers gain power relative to husbands, daughters gain freedom relative to sons. Through this family structure, daughters are seen as more equal and can enter the workforce. Since less control is exerted on the daughter in the egalitarian family, they are given more room to engage in delinquent behavior, just as the sons were in the patriarchal families. But boys are still more likely to engage in risky behavior overall. That's under Hagen's theory. So Hagen states that the fundamental premise of power control theory is that mothers relationally and instrumentally control their daughters more than sons. Instrumental controls involve basic supervision over the child. Relational controls involve the emotional bonds that ward off deviant behavior by the child. Instrumental and relational controls are exerted more by mothers than fathers in both of those family structures. Hagen says the relationship between gender and maternal relational control is stronger in the patriarchal families, and thus the relationship between mothers and daughters is intensified in these families. On the other hand, sons experience more relational control from their fathers, which that would make sense as it flows. There is some criticism, of course, circulating about this power control theory. Some of this criticism is based on ideas that have not been assessed by the theory. Hagen's theory does not factor in other circumstances besides power balance in the household that might influence delinquency, such as power and class in society as a whole. An example of this would be single mother families in impoverished areas. Also explained that the theory was only used to explain what they call common, quote-unquote common, or minor delinquent behavior, not chronic criminal offenders. And finally, critics say that Hagen's theory has not really been tested against other major theories, so it is difficult to conclude if his findings are legitimate. According to critics, a major critique of the power control theory is that the gender differences within delinquent behavior have little to do with socialization and parental controls. They say that the gender differences are simply due to the biological differences between males and females and their propensity for aggressive and antisocial behaviors. So, another theory, more critics. Before we move on to the final topic, I just want to do a brief summary overview of what we've covered so far. Female delinquency. We're going to go back to the beginning. Female delinquency was considered unimportant by early delinquency experts because girls rarely committed crimes, and when they did, it was sexual in nature. Interest in female delinquency has risen because the female crime rate has been increasing while the male rate is declining. There are distinct gender patterns in development that may explain crime rate differences. Girls are socialized to be less aggressive than boys. Girls read better and have better verbal skills than boys. Gender differences may have both biological and social origins. The female proportion of the delinquency rate has grown at a faster pace than that of males during the past 25 years. Though males still are arrested more often than females, the intergender patterns of delinquency are remarkably similar. And then we discussed the question, are female delinquents born that way? There are a variety of views on why girls become delinquent and why there are gender differences in the crime rate. At one time, it was believed that girls were naturally less aggressive and female criminals were a biological oddity, aberration. Some experts still believe that hormonal differences can explain why males are more aggressive. Some experts believe that males are more aggressive because they have evolved that way to secure mates. Under some circumstances, females may act more aggressively than males. Some experts believe that girls have been socialized to be less violent. Female delinquents may be the product of a destructive home life, rebelling against abusive parents. The liberal feminist view is that girls did not have the same opportunities to commit crime as boys, and that rising female crime rates represent changing life circumstances. And finally, critical feminists see female delinquency as a function of male domination and abuse. So that kind of gives us an overview of what we've covered already. The last topic, it's going to be extremely short. We're going to critique the differential treatment of girls in the juvenile justice system.